Hi, my name is Stuart Lynch, and this is the second video in a 7-part series on building a full weather app using WeatherKit. In this video, I'll introduce you to LocationManager so that your app will be able to determine your current location and display that weather for the location when the app launches. I love getting your feedback, so tap the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video and leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to the video and ring that bell to get notifications of new videos. And if you want to support my work, you can buy me a coffee. If you're working along with me, you can continue on from the source code that you completed in the last video. However, if you're just jumping in here and you want to work along, you can download the completed project from that last video. Just make sure you download the branch for video 1. I've already started a branch now for this video, and the completed source code for this video will be in that branch. Links to both branches are in the description. Remember, you'll need a developer account, and you'll have to change the bundle ID to your own, and make sure that WeatherKit is enabled on both the Capabilities and App Services tab for the app identifier for My Weather in your account. Well, the end game in this series is to be able to view the weather and forecast information for a number of cities, including where you might be at the current point in time. Each city will have a name along with a latitude and longitude that we can use to fetch the weather information for that location. So we're going to create a mechanism for creating cities and persisting them to the device, but that's going to come in later videos. For now, we want to use LocationManager to determine our current location, and then use the CurrentLocation geocoder class to do a reverse geocode location lookup to determine the location name. Now our app is going to grow, so I want to organize it first by creating a folder for on my views and any models that I may have. So first, create a folder called Forecast Views, and put both Forecast Views and Attribution View in there. Create a folder called Models. Inside that folder, create a new Swift file and call it City. We'll need to import CurrentLocation and then create a struct called City and make sure that it's identifiable because we're going to present these cities in a list. And this city needs 4 properties. First, an ID property because it's identifiable, and initialize it as a UUID. The second will be a name, and that's a string. And then for the latitude and longitude, both of those will be doubles. Next, create a computer property for coordinate, and that will be of type CLLocation coordinate 2D, and you can simply return an instance of the CLLocation coordinate 2D by supplying both the latitude and longitude. We're going to need another computed property for a CLLocation type, so create one called CLLocation of type CLLocation and initialize it exactly the same way by passing in the latitude and longitudes. Now, inside the Services folder, create a new Swift file and call it LocationManager. Import CurrentLocation, and then create a class called LocationManager, and then apply the @observable macro. Now, we'll need an instance of the CLLocationManager, but this doesn't need to be observed, so we can create it with the @observationIgnored macro and let that manager be an instance of the CLLocationManager. And then create 3 observed properties. The first, a var called userLocation, and it'll be an optional CLLocation. Next, a CurrentLocation, which will be an optional city type that we will construct using the latitude and longitude of the user location, along with a name that we will have to determine once we have the user location. The third property is to know when we actually have the correct authorization for actually letting the user know what their location is. So call it isAuthorized and initialize it as false. Now, before we go any further, we should make sure that we ask the user to give us that permission. So select your app in the navigation bar and choose the target. Select the Info tab, and then on the last line, click the plus button and create a new entry. Search for and select Privacy, Location When in Use, Usage Description. Then in the value field, enter a string with something like this. Would like to provide you with the weather in your current location. Well, back in Notification Manager, we want to be notified of changes to the status and get updates to our location. So you'll need access to some functions that are part of the LocationManager delegate protocol. So back where you created the class, conform LocationManager to both NSObject and LocationManager delegate protocols. And then create an initializer, and it'll be an override init, and call super.init. And then specify that the manager, which is a LocationManager's delegate, will be this file itself. So we'll be able to use those delegate functions. Next, create a function that you can call Start Location Services that we'll be calling from the initializer. The Location Manager object has an authorization status property that lets us know if we have authorized this permission. And this is an enum. And there are two cases that we'll need to check for. One is always authorized, or we do a check again for the authorization status for authorized when in use. Now, if that's the case, we tell the manager to start updating location, and we can set is authorized to true. And then we could proceed. If this has not yet been granted, as would be the case on our first launch, your app will request that you give that permission. So we should set is authorized to false and make a call to the manager's request when in use authorization, which is what we asked for in the plist. Once you are authorized, you should be getting updates that you can respond to. So there is a Location Manager delegate function called didUpdateLocations that provides us with an array of locations. But we want to get the last one in that array and assign that to user location. Now, before we create the city object, we'd like to know if we can reverse geocode to find the name of that location. So outside of this function, create a new function called getLocationName that's going to have one parameter, location, that will be of type CLLocation. And we'll be making an asynchronous call to the CLGeocoder function that will return a string that hopefully will be the location name. The function that we'll be calling will provide us with an optional placemark type that has a locality property. That's the name, so that we can get that by trying and awaiting the call to the CLGeocoder reverse geocode location function, passing in the location, and choosing the first one. And since it's optional, we can nil coalesce it as an empty string. Back in the didUpdateLocations function, then, we can use an iflet to unwrap the user location. So create a task unit of work. We can let the name of our location then be by awaiting the result of calling the getLocationName for user location function. And then we can update our city, which is the current location, by creating a new one and specifying that the name is this name and the latitude is the user location's coordinate latitude and the longitude is the location's coordinate longitude. The user location will only ever be asked once for that permission, so if they deny it or change it after the fact in settings, we will need to know about that. Then the Location Manager authorization status property will change, so we'll need to act accordingly. So there's another delegate function then that we'll need to implement and that is the LocationManager did change authorization function. Inside there, we can switch on the manager authorization status. Now, in this case, I don't find it very useful to let Xcode generate the cases for me, as it actually messes it up. So I'm going to do it manually. In the case where the status is either authorized always or authorized when in use, then we can set is authorized to true and issue the manager request location function. In the case of not determined, it means that we have never asked, so we'll set is authorized to false. Then issue the manager's request when in use authorization function. If it is denied, then we'll simply set is authorized to false. For all other cases, and this would include the case where a parent has restricted access, we can use the default case and simply call the start location services function. The final function we'll need is one where LocationManager did fail with error, and in that case, we can just print the error's localized description. Now, if the user denies permission or goes to the Settings app and turns it off after the fact, when our app launches or is brought to the forefront, it'll get that update, so we cannot present our forecast view. We need to present an alternative view. So create a new folder called Other Views. Inside there, create a new SwiftUI view and call it LocationDenied View. And then replace the body with a content unavailable view that has a label, description, and an action. For the label, use a label with the title string location services and use a system image of a gear. For the description, I'm going to create a multi-line text view that will describe to the user what they need to do to change the settings, like what I've done here. And then to align it to the left, set the multi-line text alignment to leading. For the actions, I'm going to create a button where the label is just Open Settings, but the action is a UI application.shared.open function, where the URL is a string, which is the UI application.openSettings URL string, and we'll force unwrap that with an empty dictionary for the options and nil for the completion handler. And you can set the button style to bordered prominent. Now, how do we present that view? Well, at the app starting point, the MyWeatherApp file, create an instance of the LocationManager class, and it's a state object. And attach to the window group an environment object that injects that location manager into the environment. And now you can surround the forecast view with an if clause that checks to see if the LocationManager.isAuthorized property is true. And if not, we can add an else clause that will go to the LocationDenied view. Now, all we have to do is go back to our forecast view and replace that hard-coded location with what we get from our location manager. So first, we'll create an environment variable for the LocationManager.self and assign it to a variable named LocationManager. Now your preview is going to break, but we'll fix this in just a minute. Add another state property that we can call selectedCity that will be an optional city type. And this will be our current location when we first load, but in the future we'll be replacing this with another city that we might be choosing from a list of cities. In the VStack, then surround the entire contents with an if-else clause, with an if-let-selected-city clause to unwrap the selected city. Well, if you have a selected city, you might as well display the name. So in the else clause, above the unwrapping of the current weather, create a text view that displays the selected city name and give it a font of title. Now we need to observe two things. First, we'll need to observe when our location manager's user location changes, and then if so, update the selected city. And then we observe a change in the selected city. We'll want to get an update to the weather for that new selected city, which is coming later. Now I want to do a slight refactoring here by copying the body of this task here and creating an asynchronous function with that body and pass in the city as an argument. So I'm going to call the function fetchWeather for the city that will pass in, and it's going to be asynchronous. And then I can pass that, what I've just copied, into the body of that function. The CLLocation then that will pass into that weather function then will be that passed in city's location. So when our current location changes, we'll want to update that selected city. So what we can do is change this task function here to one that contains an ID, which is simply some property to watch for changes on, which is our location manager's current location, and it'll be an asynchronous on appear essentially. And we'll get an error that the city must be an equitable type. So we'll need to go back to the city and we'll simply add that it is hashable, which will make it work for us. Then in the body, we can use an if-let to unwrap the current location and check to see if the current location is nil. And if so, we'll update selected city with the current location. And we'll need to check if nil, otherwise it'll be requesting updates every time you move around, and we don't want that to happen. We'll only want that when the app launches or when it comes to the foreground. Next, we'll use another task with an ID that watches for changes on the selected city. And then in the closure, we can unwrap it with an if-let and await the results of a call to the fetchWeather function passing in the selected city. Well, now the moment of truth. We can fix our preview from complaining by adding a location manager to the environment, and you will find that the preview will update with the default city, which for me is Cupertino, and I see that the weather is mostly clear, and it's in the evening, and it's 11 degrees Celsius. I'm going to run this in the simulator though, but I want to make sure that I have a location set. Now, if you don't have a simulator open, you can select one for your target. And from the Xcode Open Developers Tool menu, open the simulator app. Then from the Features menu, choose the location, Custom Location, and enter the coordinates of where you are right now. Remember, we did that in the last video, and for me, that's North Vancouver, so I can enter my latitude and longitude here. I can build and run, and then when it first launches, I'm asked to give permission. So I'm going to allow while using the app. It then determines my location, gets the name, and displays it, along with the current time, conditions, and temperature. Fantastic. Well, I need to do my next test of location services on a device, as you can no longer access location services through the Settings app on a simulator. I don't know why they changed that. So let me choose my development iPhone here and run it on that phone. And I'm going to display that on the screen. Again, I'm asked to give the app permission, so let me do that. Shortly after, you see it finds my location in North Vancouver and presents me with the weather. Now I'm going to exit to the desktop now and open the Settings app. I can go to Privacy and Security and then to Location Services. And I can find my weather app, and I see that it is currently running with the while using permission. Well, I can open this up and change it to never. And when I switch back to the app, I'm no longer asked to give permission, but I'm taken to the Location Denied screen where I am given instructions on how to enable it. So if I switch back to the Settings app and to the Location Services, I can change that permission back by using the app as I was instructed. And then when I switch back to the app itself, I'm shown again the current weather for North Vancouver. Perfect. Well, right now the weather updates only when the selected city changes, so you won't get any weather updates unless you quit and relaunch the app. And we'll get to that in a later video, so don't worry about it for now. In the next video though, we'll start to add some additional cities and see if we can find the current weather for them. At the same time, we'll spruce up the UI a bit with some nice background images. So if you're enjoying this series, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel so that you'll know when new videos are released.